Alright, what's up guys? So welcome to another Talk and Drive, Sunday Talk and Drive. Apologies in advance if the audio is a little subpar and if the camera's a little shaky. The last minute I realized that my DJI mic setup was out of batteries, and so we're going back to the old school shotgun mic that's weighing a little bit heavily on the suction cup mount. So I can already see the, I don't know, maybe it's just how it looks to me in the camera lens that it's, or the viewfinder, that it's shaky a little bit, but maybe it won't come out that way. Hopefully it will. But in any case, so I was thinking about this recently, and I thought this would be maybe an interesting topic for discussion, whatever. But I'm curious as to how many of you out there that are really into cars have ever, maybe at one point in time or another, maybe currently, have ever had that like imposter syndrome feeling. Imposter syndrome feeling. If you're not familiar with that term, it is sort of the feeling of, it's almost like you don't belong. You feel like an imposter. You feel like you do this thing or you're into this thing, but you kind of feel like you don't really belong or should be into that thing, maybe because you just don't know enough, and it's that suspicion that like somebody's going to find you out and be like, oh, you're, faking it or something like that. So maybe a working world example is like, I don't know, say you're a developer or something like that, and you work on a project or you work on software, and you just you get your stuff done, but you kind of feel like everybody else is a better developer than you or knows more than you do, and you kind of feel like you're not quite at the level maybe that you should be at, and that you're going to get found out. It's a real thing if you look it up, if you've never heard of it. But yeah, you can get that in any place in life, I think. And I've kind of thought about that the other day, because like, I certainly consider myself at least a car enthusiast. I don't know if there's a difference between a car guy or a girl. For all intents and purposes throughout this conversation, I'm just going to say car guy, but I really mean either. Or a car enthusiast. Like, is there a difference between the two, or is it interchangeable? But let's just say that, like, let's say that you're really into cars, or that you have a thing for cars, but you feel like you don't know as much about them as, say, other people in the industry or your social circle, or people that you see on like social media or whatever, in the sense that maybe you don't know as much of the technical sort of details of an engine, or you maybe couldn't take one apart and put it back together again. I don't know that your average car person can do that, but like, do you ever go through and think about the things that you don't know how to do, completely disregarding the things that you do know or do know how to do, and think, do you feel like an imposter, car guy imposter? So I think that's kind of like an interesting thing, and I've had that at least once or twice before. I think that, like, personally, I've at least been into cars since my mid-teens, to the point where like I really paid attention to stuff, was buying car magazines, was going to like local little car meetups here and there, like super local, I don't even know if they had, I'm sure they had Cars and Coffee back in the day, but if they did, I wasn't aware of them. But anyway, yeah, so I wonder if, or personally during that time, I never really gave this any thought until much later in life. More so probably around the time that I've had this car. So the little bit of, tinkering I've done with cars that I've had in the past, which is super minor, almost nil compared to this car. But I've always, not always, but I've had that thought before of like, do you pass as a car guy, or as a car enthusiast? And then you kind of like, well, there's no real defined criteria. It's not like in order to be a car guy, you got to be able to take apart an engine. But, if you spend some time with people who are like really, really into cars, who really know their shit, I don't know. Have you ever questioned that, or not questioned it, but like kind of thought like maybe you're a little out of your league or something like that? I think that's, I don't know, I think that's kind of interesting for some reason, more like that psychological sort of thing. And I've definitely had that before. And then just skipping right to the end on why I've ultimately concluded that it's a silly notion. I mean, I guess it's not silly just because you have that thought or something. I think it's legitimate. There wouldn't be the term imposter syndrome if it wasn't a real thing that a lot of people have experienced in various aspects of their career or hobbies or life or whatever. But I guess one of the reasons why I kind of, a good recent notion that I heard that I think dispels that is, so I don't know if there's a lot of different car YouTube channels that I watch, and one of them that's been a little bit more recent that I've caught on to is this channel by this guy Casey Puch. So if you've never heard of that channel before, that guy, you know, he's a dude out of Ohio, racing enthusiast, car enthusiast, one of those guys who really knows their shit. Has built, like, he built like a replica Batmobile. He runs a nonprofit that he started called Genius Garage that gets college kids for free into this, like, it's kind of like a school, but out of his garage that he runs, that, you know, gets kids like building cars and into racing. And, I mean, it's a lot more than that, but, you know, that's kind of the general idea. But if you listen to any of his videos, you're like, wow, dude really knows his shit. And so I was watching a video that he did, I forget when, at some point, and you know, he was talking about, I think it was like is it like, you know, car guy poser, like, are you a poser or something like that, old school skating term. But, you know, I think ultimately the thought was, and I agree with this, is that, like, if you have a just real enjoyment for cars, regardless of what anybody else is thinking or knows about that, then, I mean, I think that makes you a car guy, right? Like, if you can just get in your car, go for a drive, really enjoy it, or just look at your car in the driveway and admire just how great of a design it is, or things about it that you love, or even if it's not your car, you just go to car shows by yourself and really just have a love for the different, you know, I don't know, it's starting to sound weird, but you know what I mean, like, just to really enjoy cars, even if it's at a private level, even if you're not sharing, you know, pictures and snapping them all over Instagram and, you know, whatever, just kind of the overall love and enjoyment for cars. I mean, doesn't that qualify as you being a car enthusiast, being a car guy? I mean, you know, like, I think cameras are cool, right? I enjoy using them for the purpose of making videos and sometimes taking pictures, but I certainly wouldn't call myself a camera guy, right? I don't know really, I couldn't tell you the difference between an R5 and an R6 camera, or, you know, the difference of certain lenses and things like that. I mean, I know some basic stuff, but, like, certainly not enough to go on like a photography forum and be able to, you know, wax intellectual about ISO levels and aperture and stuff like that. Like, I know enough to hopefully make some passable videos, but again, certainly I wouldn't claim to be a camera guy. I don't have a stockpile of old cameras on shelves and stuff, but you know, when it comes to cars, yeah, I think that if you just genuinely have a love for these things, and regardless of whether or not that's driving them or just admiring them, how they look, even if it's not yours, I mean, I would say that's got to qualify you as being a car guy, even if you don't really know, like, you couldn't tell the difference between the differences in a 70 and a 73 Camaro, or, you know, why this engine was a little bit better than that engine and stuff. And so, but I think it's an interesting thing when you kind of take into account the things that you don't know and kind of disregard the things that you do know. So maybe focus on, like, listen to, like, maybe two guys have a conversation about an era of cars and stuff, and you're like, man, I have no idea what the fuck they're talking about. But then, you know, maybe there's an era of cars and stuff that you actually know a lot about, and you don't take that as much into consideration because you're only thinking about the kind of info that you don't know. And so, yeah, I think that's, I don't know, that just kind of, that was like one of those random thoughts that came to me the other day that I thought, you know, is that, I'm sure I'm not the only person that's had that thought, but have you ever experienced that, where you kind of feel like, you know, you might be in a conversation, or you might be reading about something about a car or whatever, and you're just kind of, it occurs to you, like, how much out there it is that you don't know, or maybe you're not able to do mechanically, and you're like, you know, wow, that, like I feel like I might be a car guy, but, like, that guy's really a car guy. I don't know, are there really levels of that when you're just an enthusiast of cars? Probably not. Probably not. But I don't know, so I was curious about anybody that maybe has had that sensation before. So I think I mentioned this in a prior video or whatever, but like my father-in-law, for example, like insane car guy, took two 1961 Impalas and actually joined them together to make a custom one-of-one Impala wagon that he had in a bunch of like high-level car shows. Took second place at SEMA, took second place at the Riddler in Michigan. I mean, like that's like a high-level build kind of thing. I mean, he didn't build it by hand. I mean, he had garages do it, but he worked with them and designed the whole thing. So I think that's pretty significant. So, you know, listen to him get into a conversation with, you know, some of his car buddies and like, you know, so I don't know, maybe it's, I wouldn't say that was an influence, but like it's probably like an area where I thought like, man, I don't know shit about what they're talking about. But does that not mean that you can't still be a car guy or a car enthusiast? Because, you know, you can just, you can know some stuff or whatever, maybe not to that degree, but just have an overall like real love and appreciation and admiration for cars. So I think you can. And I think that as long as you can find enjoyment in them in your own way, whatever that is, I say that makes you a car guy, car enthusiast, whatever you want to call it. There was a whole cadre of cyclists on a one-lane back road, one lane each way. Went that way, so we're going this way. Because balls to that. I know it's Sunday, beautiful weekend, beautiful holiday weekend, but man, back roads and bicyclists, they don't mix. In any case, so yeah, I don't know, that was kind of a short-lived topic, but it was something that I kind of thought, you know, was worthy bringing up in conversation, bringing to the audience here. What makes you a car guy? Or do you ever feel like, not what makes you a car guy, but have you ever felt like, have you ever had that imposter syndrome feeling? And I guess that's the same thing in Casey's video when he was talking about car guy poser. I guess it's kind of the same thing, I suppose. But I think imposter syndrome is, like, I think a poser is a very subjective thing, where I think imposter syndrome is an objective condition that people really experience. The other one is just whether or not you think that person is pretending or not. So what would make you a real imposter, I suppose? So, and I guess this is a subjective interpretation because, you know, maybe guys who really know stuff just think that a guy who goes to Cars and Coffee and takes some pictures is not really a car guy. I don't know. But I would think along the terms of like, you know, if you are pretending to know more than you are or more than you do. So if you go and try to impress people with knowledge that you don't have, or try to come off as some sort of expert because you're looking to, again, impress people for whatever weird reason, which I've never really understood why people do that. Like, if you're pretending to know something about a subject that you know nothing about just to get some kind of positive response from somebody, like, I don't understand how that doesn't, that's like fake gratification, I guess. Like, I don't know why you would be interested to do that, because it's not genuine. Like, you would know that that's like, yeah, I don't know. Seems like a strange concept to me. But anyway, I think that would probably be an example of what would make you a legit imposter in that world. Is, you know, you're trying to wax intellectual about stuff that you really don't know anything about. So, but again, if you just genuinely enjoy driving, admiring cars, going to car shows, or even just staring at your, like, if you saw the last Talk and Drive, where I went on the entire thing about how I want to buy a Supra. I know, Mark IV Supra, but it's a car I've loved for 27 years now. 27 years long love affair. I won't go into the whole thing again, but nonetheless, I could, God willing, I own that car someday. I'm sure I will. Better. I could have that car just sitting in the driveway, no one around, and stare at that thing for hours and be probably in awe. And you might think that, like, what's so special? Really, is it that? Okay, but never mind that it's a Supra. Like, take whatever car that you, like Doug DeMuro, right? So his car was a Porsche, oh crap, I forget. What is it? Carrera? Yeah, Carrera GT. So, you know, for him, like, that's a car, like, I think it's a cool car and all, but, like, it doesn't really if you put one next to a Supra, never mind the fact that it's of course, Carrera GT is way more valuable than a Supra, but if you put them together, I'm taking the Supra because that's my car. But my point is that that's a car where he could just have that thing in his driveway or his garage and just sit there and admire it day in and day out. No one around, doesn't have to, you know, snap pictures of it, or even if he didn't know how the internals of the engine worked, could just really admire it, love it, and everything like that. Yeah, I think, by all means, I think that qualifies you as being a legit car enthusiast. So, yeah, I don't know. Every once in a while I get some really cool responses to some of these topics, and I appreciate them all. So, yeah, I thought this would be one that might garner a response from someone being like, hey, have you ever had that whole, like, car guy imposter syndrome thing before? Again, it's like one of those silly but not silly notions. It's kind of silly because, you know, there's no objective measure as to what makes you a car guy. But imposter syndrome as a thing, as a condition, is a very real thing that you can find tons of examples of people experiencing that online. Again, particularly in their careers, but I'm sure it happens at all levels. So, yeah, seemed like an interesting topic to kind of delve into. But as for the Supra, real quick, going back to that again, I won't rehash all the Supra love talk that I did last time. But so I've been thinking about this a little bit more, and I think it would be cool to do a video series of hunting for one's dream car. It's not a new concept. I'm sure it's been done before, but like, I mean, and I'm sure this has probably been done before too. But from the hunting for it online to like working with an auction house, because I'm probably going to work with a Japanese auction house in order to get one, unless like a really great one I found at like a dealership. But I've been watching a ton of Japanese auction house videos, and yeah, I mean, if you're not particular about the things that a dealership will do to the car when they take possession of it, and if you're capable of doing them yourself, like really basic maintenance type stuff and, you know, cleaning it up, you can save yourself a ton of money just working with an auction house or an auctioneer or whatever, those guys that offer that service where they go on your behalf and find the car at an auction and bid on it to your budget level and stuff like that. But anyway, so I think that it'd be fun to make a video series from start to finish of that, to eventually getting it. I don't necessarily have a timeline to say that, like, you know, here's where it's going to go from and to, but hopefully to eventually find that one out there. Still got to figure out how I'm going to pay for it, but we'll worry about that later. But yeah, I think it'd be cool to do a video series about that. Going to port to pick it up, man. And yes, that is very much a car, again, that I could just leave in the driveway and just stare at that thing in awe. Because, you know, for whatever reason, that was a car that, when I was growing up, just absolutely grabbed my attention. Which, that's another thing that I find kind of fascinating. What cars grab people's attention for one reason or another? And why was it, you know? Like, sure, there's a ton of people out there who, you know, let's again use the Supra example, saw the Mark IV in Fast and Furious, and, you know, it had all the livery on it, and, you know, it was doing all kinds of crazy ass stunts and stuff, and that might have grabbed their attention. But, you know, let's say that you didn't see a car in a movie and loved it for one reason or another. I've always been kind of curious about that. And again, I'll use Doug DeMuro as an example with his Carrera GT. When he was talking about, like, walking down the street and seeing one on the side of the road, and it just, something kind of just snapped, and he saw it and just was completely enamored with it, and had wanted one ever since. It's just interesting, the things that, like, the things that happen in someone's head. Man, this has turned into a real psychological discussion video today. But it's just interesting, the things that happen in someone's head. In the case of, let's say, a car, and won't get, like, you know, crazy or anything, but in the case of seeing a car or something like that, that just resonates with you for one reason or another. And I don't really know what it is about the Supra that resonated with me as much as it did. Like, was it as simple as the Bode spoiler? I don't know. 3000 GT had the same kind of spoiler. I think that's an awesome car. I'd love to own one of those someday, but no, it's not that. But yeah, just something about the look of that car is just insanely sexy. Now, the front end, and again, I mentioned this before, is a little, the stock front end is a little meh. I'd probably change that out with the body kit, but, because I'm not one of those like, oh, it's gotta be bone stock. Nah, I mean, it's not gonna be all riced out, but it's gonna have some flair to it, I assure you. But anyway, what is it about the design of a car that just absolutely captivates your attention, that makes you obsess over it? And the fact that you would even obsess over a car in the first place, regardless of what it is. I mean, I've never obsessed over, a camera or a boat. Or, I don't know, pick something that like somebody could be really super passionate and knowledgeable about. But for me, for probably anybody watching this, it's cars, right? And so what is it about that particular car that just absolutely grabs your attention? I don't know. It's interesting. I mean, there's no denying that these things just look amazing. So many different shells. Like... And it's also like a genre of car, right? Because again, you got people who love old classic muscle cars, or people who love European sports cars, or JDM, or, you know, whatever. It's the style, the flair of it. And of course the sound. I'm only saying that because, you know, kind of the burbles rattle back there. And you know what, it's side topic, but as cool as burbles are, I think I gotta get rid of them. I think at some point getting a boot mode license, that's gonna be one of the things that we do, is because like ever since I upgraded the exhaust, and it feels like over time it's gotten a little bit louder, but man, sometimes this stuff is just, it's obnoxious. Very, it's not quite like, you know, we're nowhere near gunshot level with the burbles, but they're a little rough sometimes. Anyway, so, all right, well, that was a quick kind of rundown, I suppose, for a quick little topic for today. Car guy imposter syndrome. Why do you have it? Or why, if you've ever experienced it, why do you think? And if you still experience it, have you, well, I don't know, that's kind of a silly question. Because, like, it's not really something you necessarily talk yourself out of, I guess. It's, you could kind of reason it away with the thought, like I mentioned with Casey's video about, you know, just the very act of being able to enjoy a car, by extension, I mean, makes you a car enthusiast, because not everybody thinks of cars that way, right? Like, a lot of people think of cars as just, you know, they're perfectly happy to get into a Prius and go from point A to point B and think nothing of it, right? So, yeah, I mean, it is definitely a certain type of person who, like, really just enjoys a car. And again, of course, in any hobby and anything like that, there's going to be levels, like people who can do things that are extraordinary with cars, and then people who just like the way they look or like the way they sound, like a particular engine. Yeah, I really kind of consider it all the same thing in terms of overall enjoyment, enthusiasts. If you would even bother to go to a Cars and Coffee, just to go look at other people's cars for an hour or two, I mean, I think that alone, you know, just for the enjoyment of it qualifies you, right? So, anyway, I'm not in the business of, you know, setting the grades of car guyism, just sort of discussing, thinking through, like, all the different means of making one a car person, what it is to be a car person. Let's see, so what else? So yeah, so we talked about the car guy stuff, talked about the Supra stuff a little bit. I still want to talk about the Supra some more. So again, if you didn't see that last video, man, so the Supra, it's been a 27-year long obsession for loving this car. It's just that every time I've gotten around to it, I've maybe a couple of times considered actually trying to buy one. It just became more and more out of reach, just because they just got more and more expensive. And I would think that, like, you know, over this amount of time, you know, surely the obsession with the movie and everything else is tapered off, and now you can pick up a Supra for a reasonable price. Nope. And nowadays, at least in the American market, they're just not realistic. And dealers in particular, man, dealers are scumbags. And they just, like, I'm seeing Supras go for, like, you know, 50, 60,000 mile Supras approaching 200s. And it's like, really? It just seems absurd. Absolutely absurd. Maybe less miles than that, but you know what I mean. Still, we've seen those numbers, and it's just ridiculous. So, yeah, I have no issue. In fact, I almost prefer a right-hand drive at this point. Because even if well, I've been through down that road. If I had the money, would I really spend that much for a Supra? Yeah, probably. If I had nothing better to do with it, if it was like excess money, sure, why not? But in being realistic, yeah, no, I think I would prefer a right-hand drive at this point. And that's not even settling. The only problem is that my three, like, have to have options. I don't know that they're possible with the right-hand drive market. So obviously an RZ or an RZS, 6-speed, and the target roof, or as they call it over there, the aero roof. I don't think that combination was ever a thing. I think the aero roof in the Japanese market was only offered for the automatic. And so then you can get into like, well, you know, why don't you just get an SZ, which had the roof kind of commonly, and do a swap. Well, that's one thing that I'm kind of not really that interested in doing, and it's not because it wouldn't be, like, I have no interest in keeping it authentic to the original. Like, if I get one, I'm keeping it forever. And so I don't care that it wouldn't be like a real RZ if we did a JTE swap or GTE swap. Or if it was like an automatic that we did a manual swap. Like, so the fact that what the car has now wouldn't match the engine code or whatever like that, like, none of that I give a shit about, because again, you would only care about that if maybe the car were like an investment and you plan to sell it in the future with increased value and stuff like that. I would keep this thing till death. So the fact that it wouldn't be an original to whatever it was made for means nothing to me, but the expense of doing something like that is kind of, you know, yeah, technically you could get into an SZ right-hand drive with an aero roof for pretty cheap. And then, you know, maybe even a manual, so then all you really got to do is the swap. But then you get into like, well, the SC had a different transmission than the RZs did, had a 5-speed, and so you'd still have to do the transmission swap, even if it were already a manual. So you're really just getting the shell and be able to get the target roof. I don't know. It gets a little dicey at that point, so I haven't really figured out what I want to do with that, but I think probably, but though it's funny because if you go on Supra forums, and I think I mentioned this too, so I'm repeating a little bit about the Supra stuff, but it's been on my mind, and so this is the kind of stuff I'm currently obsessed with and I want to talk about. But if you go on the Supra forums, like, most people hate the target roof. They either have them and they never take them off because it's a pain in the ass to do it, and it leaks, and it's annoying. The amount of people that I've seen that actually really love their roof is pretty small. Which, you know, whatever, teach his own. But I think it would be awesome. And it used to be one of those, like, things that I would absolutely not compromise on. I'll never compromise on being a turbo and manual transmission, even though, again, you can swap those things. But I don't know, since I don't think that was a combo for the Japanese market. Seems like I would probably have no choice unless I want to, like, Frankenstein one together, which I don't know that I've ruled that out, really, but to start, I think it'd be pretty baller just to get a hold of a twin turbo 6-speed. But yeah, making a whole video series on that from start to finish, finding one, however long it takes to actually go through, and there's like 6 different pages that I've been stalking where Supras are for sale. Check that out. Old school charger. Nice. Wow. Yeah, whatever happened to the amazing colors of cars back in the day? I didn't watch the video, but I saw I think it was from Donut, pop up on my YouTube feed, and it was like, what happened to car colors? And it was like, you know, cars from like the 60s and 70s that used to be like these really cool, like orange, purple, yellow, green, and everything else, to like cars now where everything is white, gray, black, boring. It's kind of a shame. I miss the old sort of flair of the car. Like, check out, like, I don't know, like, if you can see this, like, white, black, black, white, silver, whatever that was, Prius, who cares? That guy red, black, black in front of me. I don't know, is that beige champagne? It's kind of a shame. Car colors are just boring. Need more flair. Need more livery. That's kind of why I want to import some JDM cars. Get things a little more interesting around here. I'm still thinking about that too, but I want to save that topic because the whole import car business thing, doing a lot of research on that. But we'll save that for another time. But yeah, anyway, so I don't know. I forget where I kind of left off, but Supra. Yeah. So start to finish, finding one to delivery. I think that'd be great. And then, of course, whole series on everything being done to it. Again, I still got to figure out how to pay for this thing. And I've been told that I cannot sell this car, which I flirted with the idea, but I probably wouldn't. Because, I mean, F80 is just amazing. And again, I know we can get into, you know, where it stacks up against an E36 or an E92. Don't give a shit. F80 is an amazing car. Sure, I'd like to own those other ones at some point, but not that interested at the moment. I meant to turn there. But yeah, I think that, and then getting into all the, you know, Supra content, which, by the way, like, I've only really been looking into obtaining a Supra. I really haven't done that much research into the availability of parts to mod it out and body kits and all that other kind of stuff. I would imagine that given they're just still being popular, that there's still an availability of parts out there, but I don't really know how available that stuff is. Considering they've been out of production, at least from Japan, for 21 years now. But again, given their popularity, I would imagine that you still should be able to find a good amount of parts for them. Some of these websites that I've seen, though, that have them, like, I don't even know if they're in business anymore. They look like they're probably not in business, and it's just residual pages that are left out there over time. But I could be wrong. Anyway, yeah, so if you were watching the last video, if you saw the last video when we're at all curious by any chance, the Supra obsession is still in full swing. Man, I don't know, I hope this video comes out all right, because this all looks dark right here. Supra obsession is still in absolute full swing, and yeah, I cannot wait to make this happen. We'll get there at some point. But that's going to be dream car territory. It's going to be awesome. I'm sure my wife is sick of it by now, because all I've been talking about is getting a Supra. Hence the topic of last time's video, which was the F80 was a dream car, but not the dream car. But let's talk about some other cars that I think would be really fun to own. What are some other ones on the list? Viper GTS, that's pretty high up there. 3000 GT VR4, or, you know, GTO if you want to go right-hand drive, which I'm fine with that too. There's this dude I follow on Instagram who has a GTO, and those cars are just so cool looking. I actually think I prefer the older ones to the facelifted. So I think it was, what year was it? 96 or 97? At least the American version of the 3000 GT went from the pop-up headlights to the non-pop-up headlights. I think I probably prefer the non-pop-up headlights, but like, man, they changed it up. Like the 3000 GT in particular got like the bowed spoiler, kind of like the Supra. But I actually think I like the flat spoiler better, especially with the VR4, and the thing would tilt up at speed. That was an awesome feature. That thing just looks so cool when you kind of see it like raise up a little bit, kind of like a Porsche. So I think that would be a great car to own. 300ZX. Fun fact about the 300ZX. Saw this not too long ago. I thought this was an interesting fact. So I forget the name of the designer, but for the Nissan 300ZX, right? So the body lines on it were very, very sharp. Like, he wanted this very particular sort of super sleek look. And in order to have the headlights match, he didn't want to do pop-up headlights. but the angle of the headlights had to be 60 degrees in order to match the body lines. And up to that point, anything over 45 degrees required pop-up headlights. And he was like, no, we're not doing pop-up, but I want 60 degrees. So to the engineering team, figure out how to make it happen. So they had like hundreds of meetings over how to make this car, not just the headlights, but like overall. But he was insistent about the headlights. And so anyway, finally the team figures out how to do it. No other car had headlights at that angle that weren't pop-up. Lamborghini sees this and was like, man, I guess we could like try to figure out how they did it, or we could just license it. And so if you ever get a chance to take apart I believe it was a Diablo. The Diablo has Nissan's headlights in it. So when you take apart the headlights for a Lamborghini Diablo, you'll see Nissan stamp on it. I thought that was kind of amusing. Kind of a fun fact, fun car fact. So, alright guys, well I think that's going to wrap it up for today. So hope you enjoyed the talk, the ranting, more of the Supra obsessive stuff. We're going to make that a regular series. Definitely got to do that. But anyway, I hope you have a happy and a safe holiday weekend, Memorial Day weekend. It's beautiful out. And yeah, a lot more content coming, by the way. So real quick, if you saw the 5 things I don't really like about this car video, the number 1 thing I mentioned, the dust shields. Turns out, I said I'd ordered a replacement set from FCP Euro. Turns out I got the wrong ones. So I looked it up by part number, could have sworn they were the right part numbers, but they were the wrong parts. So I sent them back and ended up getting the correct set from ECS Tuning. They just got here yesterday. So hoping to get that done today, but if not, within the next couple of days. So that video coming soon. Yeah, along with a bunch of other content. So again, have a great and happy and safe holiday weekend, and I will catch you guys in the next one. Thanks for watching.